they win the NFC South.
Welcome to the OPPS Week 5. Dang, we're already in Week 5? And the OPPS this week, we have our first divisional opponent of the season. The Atlanta Falcons, Bucks going to Atlanta, Thursday Night Football, prime time, against the team that everyone picked to beat the Bucks and win the division. Whole bunch of new pieces, new head coach, new coordinators, new quarterback. Let's just go ahead and grab this crown and let's put it on top of them immediately without seeing anything. Okay. So I was hyped up all off season to watch this Atlanta Falcons team finally get on the field and give us something to see. Because we've been hearing a lot. We've been hearing a lot of hype. And at a certain point you gotta just be like, all right, can I see it? Can I see it? I get it. You wanna say they're the favorites of the South? That's fine. We're used to being underdogs, but I need to see this. Starting at the top, Raheem Morris at head coach. Obviously a guy we are all familiar with as Bucs fans, being a former Buccaneers head coach. I liked the pickup. I think he's one of the best defensive coaches in the NFL. I think when he was with the Bucs, that whole thing was a little premature, not the best situation. Now, being able to be a defensive coordinator, really good one for a long time, going into Atlanta, I like the move for Atlanta. Same with their offensive coordinator. Similar to what the Bucs did, a guy from the Sean McVay tree, similar offenses. I mean, the Bucs are putting up a lot more points with that similar offense and with the pieces that the Buccaneers have. We'll get into the offense of the Atlanta Falcons, but to put it nicely, underwhelming is what we'll call it. Underwhelming. I mean, that is what was hyped up all offseason, was this is going to be one of the most high-powered, high-flying offenses in the NFL. Kirk Cousins, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, a good offensive line. But I get it's early, but I have seen nothing. Nothing that leads me in that direction so far at all. Could they end up being a pretty good offense? Sure. They got the players to do it, but it's just not clicking yet over there. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Their defense is solid. So given the fact that the offense was hyped up all offseason and now the defense is looking pretty good, yes, they made a couple of late moves picking up Judon and Justin Simmons. Defenses look good, especially given the fact that the offense has not helped out the defense much up there in Atlanta. I mean, I'll give their defense props. I mean, you can just look at your latest example. The Falcons just beat the New Orleans Saints without scoring an offensive touchdown. A pick six, a special teams touchdown, and some field goals. And they end up beating the rival. It's been an interesting season for the Atlanta Falcons. Going back to game 1, they got the Pittsburgh Steelers, an elite defense. The offense only puts up 10 points. The Pittsburgh Steelers don't even score a touchdown. They kick 6 field goals and walk out of Atlanta with a W in week 1. In week 2, Atlanta goes to Philly. Both offenses are pretty slow. Late in the game, it picks up a little bit more. They're down. And it takes a game-winning drive from Kirk Cousins to get that win, 22-21 in Philadelphia. You can't take that away from them. They did what they needed to do. Kirk Cousins, in prime time, got clutch, just moved that ball right down the field, and they won the game. Against Kansas City, they put up a pretty good fight, maybe some questionable calls in that game, but they end up losing at home, 22-17, and then last week was that Saints game where they don't score an offensive touchdown. So we're looking at, they put up 10 on Pittsburgh, 21 on Philadelphia, 17 on Kansas City, and 24 on New Orleans, but none of those were offensive touchdowns. So this offense, guys, I'm not seeing it. The NFL is all about making the big plays when you need to make the big plays, and the Atlanta Falcons are doing that, and that has led to their 2-2 record. So you got to give them props for that. That's what this league is about. You got to make the big plays when they arise. But I will say, Atlanta, you are skating on very thin ice. Skating on very thin ice when you think about your 2 wins. Game-winning drive in Philadelphia, and then not putting up touchdowns against New Orleans. You're 2-2. Like I said, those are the plays that needed to be made. They got made, but you're skating on thin ice. Like, it's that thin. You guys are right here. Right here is 0-4. You're not far from 0-4. But they're 2-2, and they're right in the thick of things. They have had no games like the Bucs just had against Philly, or the Bucs had against the Washington Commanders, where it's just decisive. Nothing in doubt at all. A blowout win. Team looks like they're just buzzing. 37 points, 33 points. Not even a contest. They've had nothing like that. It's been very close, all of their games. And actually, come to think about it, all of their games, the final score has been 1-score games. So continuing with the little amount of points they've put up this season, I think that lack of explosiveness is going to end up hurting them if they don't get this together. I heard on a Falcons podcast, so I'm going to assume this is correct, but they said this year's team, through 4 games, has the least amount of explosive plays, 20 or more yards, since 2010. So, you think about some of the teams the Atlanta Falcons have had over the past few years. Yes, Desmond Ridder-led teams have had more explosive plays than this hyped-up offense all offseason. I mean. So let's go ahead and look at this depth chart. Obviously, a lot of players that we're going to know because we see this team so often. Quarterback, Kirk Cousins. Let's take a look at those stats. 864 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, a 43 QBR. Nothing good to look at there. Michael Penix is their backup. I do got to say, he went to my high school. He's from the Tampa Bay area. I did not like that he had to go to a divisional opponent. Really wanted to root for him. Running back, very good running back room. Bijan Robinson, obviously, and Tyler Algier. Bijan Robinson did leave the game late, I believe, against the Saints. Tyler Algier started getting a bunch more carries as that game went on, so something to note. A lot of these injuries you'll see questionable. They're so tough to read on a short week, so I'm not going to go too deep into them. But there's definitely some names to keep note of. Drake London, really talented wide receiver. Darnell Mooney has looked really good for them so far. I think better than anyone expected. I did not expect Darnell Mooney to look this good as their wide receiver 2. Ray McLeod, another Tampa guy, Sickles High School, wide receiver 3, looking better than he's probably ever looked with his time on the San Francisco 49ers. At tight end, Kyle Pitts, just one of those guys who seem to have all the talent in the world, but it just hasn't come to fruition as everyone expected. The consistency just not there. You look at last week, I think he had 3 targets, 0 receptions against a Saints team that usually gives up a good amount of yards to tight ends. Moving to their offensive line, it's a really good group. In my opinion, Jake Matthews, been doing it for a long time. Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry is questionable, so another guy to note there. Obviously, the Bucs have been missing their right tackle for the last 3 weeks, so Caleb McGarry, Falcons could end up in the same situation. At center, they're kind of having to figure that out as they go because Drew Dahlman did go on IR. How it ends up looking based on injury, it could be a little bit suspect, but overall I do think it's a good group. Onto their defense, as I said at the beginning of this video, it's a good group. It's a pretty good defense. I think their weakest spot is in the trenches. They haven't gotten much production from that group, that defensive line. But you look into the secondary, it's very good. It's very good in that secondary. AJ Terrell, premier corner in this league. I feel like he hasn't had a ton of success against the Bucs and Mike Evans. Mike Evans usually does get the best of him, but I'm not going to sit here and say just because Mike Evans gets the best of him, he's not a good corner. He is a good corner. Justin Simmons, late pickup in the offseason in free agency. I mean, pairing him with Jesse Bates, who's a top 2, I'll give him top 2 safety in the NFL. That's got to be the best duo in the NFL. It's got to be the best duo in the NFL. I know we have Winfield and Whitehead, but I'll give it to them because we haven't really seen them together this season with Winfield being out with injury. Mike Hughes on the other side, UCF guy, and then D. Alford in there. Nickel, based on what I've heard, He's been getting picked on a little bit so far this season. So name to note, nickel corner, Chris Godwin playing in the slot a lot. And the great start that Chris Godwin has had to the season, and the great history Chris Godwin has against the Atlanta Falcons. Keep an eye on that matchup. Chris Godwin, D. Alford. Not talking too much about matchups in this video because this is just getting familiar with the Falcons before we go into the game. Tomorrow, the preview, we'll talk a lot more about matchups and things of that nature. Into their linebacker group, Troy Anderson, who had that pick six against the New Orleans Saints last week, is questionable. That would be a massive miss from their group there because I don't think there's too much depth behind them. You see Nate Landman here is on IR. They brought in Lorenzo Carter, Caden Ellis. I mean, really, I think this may be obviously Bijan, but outside of Bijan, Troy Anderson, if he isn't able to go, I think that's going to be their biggest miss, probably even over their right tackle here. He's been really good for them. I like his game a lot. 26 tackles so far on the season, 1 interception. Just one of those inside linebackers, classic inside linebackers, gets a bunch of tackles and then able to get that interception and take it to the house. I think Chris Olave was the running him down, and he didn't catch the middle linebacker, so athletic too. And then to that defensive line, which I did state I do think is the weak part of this group. There is talent there, but I don't think they've been getting the production from that group that they expect. So it's not that they don't have good players there. I think the production coming from those players isn't what they are looking for so far. Matthew Judon, similar to Justin Simmons, really good player, late pickup. I think he does maybe 2 sacks, a sack and a half so far this season. Grady Jarrett, the veteran for them, 31 years old now at this point, sack and a half, coming off injury. David Onyemata, nose tackle there, more of a run stuffer. Zach Harrison, I believe, is a young guy. Yes, drafted in 2023. Hasn't done much since getting into the league. He had 3 sacks last season. Nothing so far this year, just 2 tackles. Am I reading that right? 2 tackles? 5 assists? Okay. And then the guy who might be the best player on their team, Young Hoku. I mean, the guy is insanely clutch. We saw him last year in Raymond James Stadium kick a long game-winning field goal on us. Did it again last week. That guy's a beast. So overall with the Atlanta Falcons, I like the moves they made with their new coaches. The offense, to me, it got a little overhyped in the offseason, and now it is very underwhelming in my opinion. They got players, they got a solid offensive line, but it's just not coming together early on in the season. And the fact that the Bucs are getting them early on in the season, they're getting them now, and then I think they play on October 27th, so not even halfway through the season. It's probably a really good thing for the Bucs that they get them early, so hopefully they can take advantage of that. Their defense, I do think, is good. They got some really big names when you're talking about A.J. Terrell, Jesse Bates, Justin Simmons, Matt Judon, Grady Jarrett. Troy Anderson, I wouldn't consider him a big name yet, but I think he's a really good player. Questionable, so keeping an eye on that. So that's going to be it for me. That's the quick summary there of the Atlanta Falcons. Tomorrow will be the preview. We'll talking more matchups rather than just looking at the Falcons roster and stuff like that. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please comment down below your thoughts on this video, your thoughts on this Falcons team. Are you in the same boat as me? This offense, a little overhyped, a little underwhelming. I don't know how you could disagree with that, with the production they've put up so far. That's going to be it. Once again, thank you for watching. Go Bucs. Y'all have a blessed one.